Welcome, folks. This is the last in a fairly solid series of talks by makers who have or are exhibiting in exhibitions as part of Everything Flows, a programme which we have curated and organised to coincide with the year of Coasts and Waters, which has rolled over from last year because of obvious circumstances. So tonight, we're joined by Paul Glazier from his studio in Amsterdam. Good evening, Paul. Are you with us?
Hey, Malcolm.
Yes,
Hi.
yes. How are you?
I'm very well. Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
very good, very good. We will move into hearing from you in less than a minute or so. I'll just say a few words about the format of this evening and a little bit of background by way of an introduction. So the exhibition by Paul, which is titled Island, is on at Rockfield Centre in Oban. That's a new community hub in the town, a town which is, of course, the gateway to Barra, which is as close as you can get by ferry, I think, to Vatersay, which is the most southerly inhabited island in the Outer Hebrides. I first met you, Paul, in 2016. You came and showed me a book dummy, and I met you again at the Vatersay Gallery, which is now Elliot Halls, in Amsterdam, where I think discussion then commenced about getting an exhibition together, or one exhibition certainly. And here we are. There has been a couple of publications made of the work. The first by Cafe Royal Books, a lovely little publication, which I have in my hands here, and my colleague John will share a link to that. We have signed copies at street level, would you believe? So, and also this tome, wonderful production of a book, Island Tides, published by Blue Coat Press, indispensable. So that's all happened in the past couple of years. So I would have to say that things have moved pretty productively for you, Paul, I think, in terms of this work and its reaching out to the public. We'll be joined by two special guests after your presentation, Paul. Very special guests, in fact, Flora Nisbet, nee Gillies, a native of Vatersay, who you have known for quite some time, and we'll hear more of that shortly. And Grant Scott, a native of the wonderful world of photography. Two people you know very well, and I'll introduce Grant very briefly when we come across to that. So we'll just move on, and I'll welcome you to share some images, Paul, and provide some background to the project that commenced almost 30 years ago. So take it away.
okay. Thank you. So I think I'll go straight into sharing my screen. So if you'll hold on a second. Okay, so I'd like to add that hopefully there'll also, I'll get the plug in now before I forget, hopefully there'll also be a show at the Elliot Halls Gallery in Amsterdam beginning of next year. So, I'm going to talk about my connection with the island. So I'm drawing a bit from my text in the books, but I'm sure you won't mind. So this first shot is taken around 1985, could be 1984, of the village of Vatersay, looking south with Sandray beyond. So yes, it's a small island, population of about 90 people, though I would say it's home in a deeper sense to many more. It's about 3.7 square miles, no trees, but with beautiful beaches, macha and hills. And this is one more recently taken, I think around 2017, digital photograph this time. It's quite interesting to see the difference in quality, but I like both. So my story with Vatersay began in 1978 when I was 12. So I accompanied a teacher from my school, Father Barnyard, and he'd been taking boys up from his previous school in Glasgow for holidays before then, for a taste for a different environment, and he'd been doing that for quite a few years. So for me, coming from the suburbs of London, it was certainly very different, and I fell in love with the place immediately. From then on, I would travel up there most school holidays, and it became a very important place for me, especially in my teens, but it still is. But having left school, I continued going up on my own as often as possible, and that really continued until the present day, although I haven't been since 2019. Okay, hopefully that'll be remedied soon. So when I first went to the island, I could immediately feel that there was something about the landscape that really resonated with something in myself. And so there was a sense of homecoming. And so later, when I was looking for a subject matter for my artistic practice, I turned very early to the islands for inspiration. Indeed, looking back, I see that the islands of the Outer Hebrides, and I have visited a lot of the others, but you know, Vatersay is very much home from home. And but I see this in general, the Outer Hebrides have played a very important role in the development of my artistic practice, but also just for myself. So faced with that landscape, my idea of beauty began to shift. So I was blown away by the landscape of the island. But I was taking photographs right from the beginning, but they were pale reflections of what I had experienced. But this was very good for me, because it showed me that beauty isn't that prettiness that I'd learned from picture postcards. It was something more visceral, or something that slipped off the rocks and the sea and caught me in the gut. So it can also have a softer side, I must say, as in this shot of the dunes. So the first few years I went to the island, it seemed like a paradise, far more real than the suburbs of London where I lived. The claustrophobia of suburban expectations evaporated, and I felt free to some extent. I became aware that there was a blending between my inner world and the rocks, the wind, the sea and sky. And it was this correlation that I really wanted to explore in my artwork, I guess. So photography was an excellent tool to start looking and collecting material, slowing down the eye, so arresting moments to be examined, and then in fact later explored through painting. But we'll come to that later. I'm going to talk a little bit about my painting. So the next few images were all made in the 80s. This was 86, I believe. So being with Father Barnyard was a great advantage, since I would go with him on his rounds and got to know many of the locals, and they made a great impression on me. This is Callum. So I was very fond of him and dropped in on him and his wife, Marianne, whenever I was up there. So Callum had travelled the world as a merchant seaman and was full of tales of his time at sea. He also loved poetry and was very well read. He would sometimes read to me in Gaelic, and it was beautiful to hear his sonorous voice rolling out this beautiful language, which I followed along with the English text. I'm afraid I never managed to learn very much. So this is Michael. Michael's also a lovely character, also a merchant seaman, like many of the men and of that generation, also with many tales of travelling. He also had a very wonderful voice, a kind of mumbling flow, like a burn or a stream, and actually made a sound recording, which I've made into a sound piece of one of our conversations. And we'll come to my sound pieces later. So this is Annie. So also wonderful to visit. Had a very sharp tongue, but she was always on her best behavior when I was with Father Barnyard. But yeah, great character. So this is Toots, Katriana, their cousin, and Maggie. So Toots and Maggie are sisters. So I've a lot of photographs of the kids. And looking back, I guess because they were always outside in the landscape that I was photographing. And then as now, they seem very much central to the life of the island and the heart of the community. So this is their brother, Francis, playing around on the boat. Teresa, being pulled along in the fish crate. Another of their siblings. So Flora Brown was someone I always used to visit, always very welcoming, ready with a tea and a piece. Yeah, it's great. Callum, again, so this was a couple of years earlier, but I wanted to include this just for the glimpse of the stove. So very typical of that time, and was the heart of many of the households at the time. This is blind Flora. So he's an auntie of the Flora that we'll speak to later. I believe they were one of the last families to live on Sandray, just south of Vatersay, before moving over early in 1900s. So back in the 70s and 80s, there are many piles of defunct cars and farming machinery lying in the dunes. So anything metal doesn't last long in the salt air. So when they died, they were just set in the dunes to fill up with sand. And at the same time, this helped to stabilize the constant drift that threatens to cut the island in two halves during the winter gales. Meanwhile, they were perfect, if not entirely safe, playgrounds for the youngsters. So some more Sinclairs, I think that's Anton, mother in the background, the sheep funk. Yeah, it always struck me how all the family were involved with the work. Likewise here, this is Hector and his daughter, Anne-Marie. This is Peggy and Dee Dee, Donald Duncan, always incredibly welcoming. And Peggy is holding a bottle of whiskey behind her back, just so that you know. This is their granddaughter, Jennifer, who now has her own children. And so we're leaping forward 25 odd years. I think this is 2010. Still going strong. So they were very much central to my experience of the island, I would say. And I was very sad when Dee Dee died a few years ago. So moving outside again. So this is just off Barrow Head. So there are still a few boats from the island that go out fishing, mostly for crabs and lobsters. This is, as I say, off Barrow Head, which is the most southerly of the Outer Hebrides chain. So it's very heavy work, but for me it was wonderful to be out on the water, working along the cliffs of Mingulay and Barrow Head, which are packed with nesting birds, together with the regularly seen dolphins, seals, and whale sharks. You really get an impression of how very rich in life these waters are. So this is Sandy again. working with the creels, and you can see how close we are to the cliffs. I wouldn't want to be there in rough weather. And this is Donald Francis, whose boat this is. Great fellow. And Ewan and his granddaughter, Katie. So yeah, this makes me feel old. So Ewan's about my age. And yeah, here we are back in the 80s. But I'd show this for fun. So that's him on the far right. And his brother Doyley is on the far left. And here's Doyley with his son. And this, I think, was 2019. And this is Donald Ryan, his son, on the left, obviously. And last I spoke to Donald Ryan, he was very keen to get his own boat and start fishing commercially. I think he had a small boat, very small boat. I think it's just behind them there, you can see. So I'm not quite ready to go out to Mingulay, but anyway, that's so that tradition continues. And this is, oh yeah, that's Donald Ryan, again, a few years earlier, with 3 of his sisters out in the dunes. Scroll up, I've got some prompting notes just to help me along. Yeah, okay, and the next one is also 2 of Doyley's, and in this amazing landscape, just caught between the sky and the water. This is actually just a pool in the dunes. And yet another. This is Emily Rose, one of the younger of the clan, on the trampoline before it. I guess it's blown away by now. I wasn't expecting that just there. But, so I think I'll pass that over for now. I'll come back to that. But it's a bit of the Vatersay village with the graveyard in front. So, yes, rather more modern day playground than the scrap. Still fun, probably a bit safer too. This is Julia. This is another granddaughter of Peggy and Dee Dee, and their father Michael out feeding the cattle. And I think Julia's shouting to me to get off the trailer. I think she's, yeah, she knows who's boss. This is Zoe, quite a few years ago now, and she'd just been soaked by her brother, had emptied a bucket of water over her head. You can see the bucket in the back there, and she wasn't too happy. And here's Flora and Neil, and at a wedding. And sorry, this is at the stag night. So the story was that the hen night was just down the road, and but the band never turned up, so the hens just came over to join the stag night, and the fun was had by all. So those are the betrothed, and we'll be speaking to Flora a bit later. And this is at their wedding, and I think it was Jamie Lee in the middle. I think it was her first time on high heels. And so another Kaylee. This wasn't actually the wedding, but Kaylee's always great fun, very much a family affair. And yeah, music is, I would say, very important on the island. Quite a few of the islanders play an instrument, including the famed Vatersay boys, of course. This is Joe, not one of the Vatersay boys, but it's waiting for more people to turn up at the bar for a jam session over in Castle Bay. Another Kaylee, this time a christening. And here we have all 4 generations together. And this is Ma, also someone I love to visit. So I think you can see in the photo that she was a very strong woman. I think probably a fairly typical life story, in that she moved to Glasgow as an adult and raised her family there, then moved back to the island in later years. And you will hear her voice in the video clip that I'll be showing you later. So a younger generation, sort of fun in the kitchen, boys and girls. So, another kitchen, another time. This is Zoe, a few years older, and looking extremely demure, very unlike her. But, and here she is more recently, and she's very much a love, shine and sparkle character, as you can see on her t-shirt. And a pile of Gillies. So her and her 2 brothers there. And this is Toots and Ian. So Toots was one of the girls on the rocks back in the 80s, in the previous photo. Not the previous photo, but one like her. So always like to keep in touch with her. They're not actually on Vatersay anymore. They're over on Barra, just up from Castle Bay. But I always think of her as a Vatersay girl. And this is also not on Vatersay, but these 2 boys, Patrick and Ian Rudy, I just like this photograph a lot. It's looking out over Castle Bay towards Vatersay, and you can see Vatersay there through the window, watching telly. So yeah, their grandmother was from Vatersay, and their grandfather was the ferryman for a few years before the causeway was built. So this is him. There's the ferryman, if you like, Ian and Mary Flora, with Patrick a few years earlier. And just to complete the story, here is Ian back in the 80s in his function as the Vatersay ferryman. So I thought I should show a picture of the causeway, because it came in, it was built in 95 and really changed the island, I think very much for the better, connecting it with Barra, and so with all sorts of consequences, but I think generally good ones. And you can also a glimpse of Gillies, which is one of the other homesteads on the island, along with Vatersay village and Uí, and the deserted Yorsdale. And that house there by the causeway is where Flora, who we'll be meeting, grew up. So I needed to had to show a photograph of Father Barnyard. He took me up there. So this is him, I think a year before he died. So 2017, I guess. And I like this portrait of him because it has everything he would need to feel at home. So he has his Bible, he has his crossword puzzle, and he has his whiskey. Though I'm not sure that would be the order of priorities, but anyway. And here he is again, walking down to the shore. This is him on the left. And they were celebrating the 100th year of the church being built on the island. And that spot down on the shore was where they would have held services before the church was built. So this is Cadin and her brother Tony, and I was very moved that they invited me to come and pay their respects, my respects, while they paid theirs, at the grave of their father, Mickty, who is also, again, Flora, who we'll be meeting later. It's her father. And I knew Mickety the first few years I was up on the island, and he would often take us out on the boat, and especially down to Mingulay. And again, lovely man. So yeah, actually I'll go back again. I think it's interesting to point out, as one person said, there's something special. There's a very special attitude to death on the islands. As one of the islanders put it, I think that with people who live in the places like this, there's a natural acceptance of death, and I think that's very true. And this is one of the things that made it feel very real for me as a youngster, and made this big impact. So yeah, going on. So this is the last image, the photo that I'll be showing, and it gives a sense of the rawness of that landscape. Although that very same landscape can be very soft and fragrant and full of flowers in the summer. So I'm going to move on to talk about another part of my practice. So it's obvious that my connection with the island has been long, and has fed me both emotionally and artistically. So Malcolm has asked me to give you a broader picture of my artistic practice. Although I've always taken photographs, I always paint. I also paint and use sound and the moving image to satisfy that itch that I've always had to make things and explore my experience of life. So my practice is very broad, so I can't present that here, but I will. So I'll just show a few things and keep it related to the Hebrides. So I'll show you this. So this is back. I'm a bit shy of showing my student work, but I thought it'd be interesting in the context of this talk to show you some of my earliest paintings made at the same time as those 80s photos. And you can see straight away that the subject matter is directly related to the island. This is in fact Flora Brown, who we saw in an earlier photo. And having this subject matter that meant so much to me, this was a great way for me to, it was my way into developing my own visual language. This is again Callum and Marianne. Callum you've seen. And this is Jonathan and Morag. So you can't see Morag, she's in the water, you can just see her hands. So she died when I was there one year. And I used to visit them a lot because they lived in the house just up the hill from the church where we stayed. So jumping forward 30 years, this is a recent, just a small work on paper, landscape, very much Hebridean flavour. And although this isn't overtly Hebridean, it's actually Doyley's wife and daughter, again on paper. And this you might recognise from the photo on the cover of the Café Royal book. So this is on ink. It's about 1 metre square, I would say. And lastly, Callum and Marianne, again, they keep popping up. I guess it's not so surprising that the last couple of years I spent so much time going through the archives, my archives for getting the book together, that yeah, these Hebridean images have kind of kept popping up, and I wanted to work back into them. So let me see. So obviously they're related, my photographs, very, very literally related with the paintings. But I thought it'd be interesting to speak briefly about the difference between painting and photography for me. So painting is a way to keep prodding at an intuition, for me at least, over a long period of time or over a series of paintings, trying to get to the core of that feeling, or to letting something emerge. Photography, on the other hand, is about being open to the moment, to that moment when suddenly something before you resonates with that feeling or emotion. In that sense, I'm very wary of calling myself a documentary photographer, which implies something objective, because there's no way I'm objective. I think the photographs are more of a documentation of my responses to a person or a place, and their responses to me. And maybe that's what all documentary photography is, but I am very aware that what I select through the viewfinder and what I paint is very much through my subjective lens. So moving along, so yeah, if I'm going to talk about my artistic practice, I need to talk about my sound and music, which are very important for me at the moment. And I don't find it very removed from painting. I think of my sound works as objects, and I'm working with composition, color, texture, and the audio equivalents. So video is a great way for me to bring all these various elements of my practice together. Though I think my approach does remain that of a painter. I just need to take a sip of water, hang on. So I would like to end now by showing you a clip of a video that I made recently. It's composed of many of my Vatersay photos, though I found a way of making them move. The soundtrack also includes field recordings made on the island, including the voices of a couple of old friends, unfortunately now departed, so Dee, Donald Duncan, and Dee and Ma. And the piece is really a reflection on the passing of time, memories, I guess. So without further ado, this is just the first 3 minutes of the piece. And the whole piece would be 30 minutes long, but that's a bit much for now. If you have headphones, this might be a good moment to use them, but hopefully you'll see the whole piece at some point, somewhere. So I'm gonna come out of screen sharing and share the video.
I didn't even need to have a cup of tea, but we don't mix as much as we used to, sort of pop in, but we don't do that anymore. That's what does it, because everybody watches the telly. Ach, ti'n agor Smile the seeds never turn around. Seeds doesn't turn around. God, I didn't even make her a cup of tea.
All right.
Right, to the girl.
Costs nothing but a good water.
Aye, that's right. The water of life that costs. The water of life that costs the capiques. Aye. Aye. Cheers then. Thanks.
Great to see that. It's very moving, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was sending a slight shiver through me watching it. So it's a very effective combination of still animation and music, and the source material is great. So that's the world premiere, I suppose, of that.
The world premiere of the first 3 minutes, yes.
Yeah. So we'll look forward to indeed seeing that at some point. This is an appropriate time, I think, to bring Flora back in to see what her thoughts on that are, and to ask Flora.
Yes, yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you can tell us a little bit about your encounters with Paul.
Well, I'm pretty shy growing up, so it probably would have been difficult for Paul to have had. I didn't probably know him so well. We were very good at running away.
That's right.
Especially if there was a camera. You know, we weren't used to tourists. You know, we didn't want them to see us for some reason when we were younger. We would roll into the shore, so we would.
That's very true, and actually, it was something I was going to say, that being with Father Barnyard was brilliant for meeting the older generation, but the young kids were like gone when Father Barnyard would come along. Yeah.
All I can explain that. I mean, we were used to the island without the causeway, so anyone that came by ferry, you know, it was like it didn't belong to us. You know, we knew who the people, the islanders were, and that was it. Anyone that was strange to us, you know, we weren't going to warm to them. We weren't going to let them even see us, which it just seems bizarre. But you know, times have changed. It's probably just as well that the causeway, you know, it did bring the island somewhat forward. But going back to that video clip, what really touched me was Ma talking about the lack of community, that we don't go and see each other so much. I get that. I get that, because when we were young, we would go house to house, though it annoyed my father because he would say, that was begging, that we were going around the houses begging for. We wanted a wee sweetie and we wanted a biscuit. But what we didn't know was we were also giving company to these old ladies who are home on their own, and they were delighted to see us. Yeah. And Flora Brown was particular. We were there more or less every day at Flora Brown's. And Flora Brown is my great aunt. Is that right? Because she's my grandfather's sister, my Keith Van, my grandmother's sister. But yeah, it just makes me feel I would like to go back and go back into that house to see her. You know, when you're thinking, that's what it makes me feel. Looking at your book again and watching, I wish I could go back. And I can remember that she had like a bucket of water outside the door. And everybody had their range, you know, the old stove, and you'd sit on the sofa.
Yeah.
And we just wait patiently for that biscuit and that sweetie.
Yes, she was always one for the biscuits and the peace. Yeah. And, but I remember that transition very much, because the first few years that I was there, the television reception was awful. It's just a snowfield. I mean, there were some televisions, but it wasn't worth it. And whenever I was visiting the old folk like Nan McKinnon, there were always people, always youngsters, running in, saying hi and running out again. And it was a constant flow. And that stopped fairly abruptly with when the television transmitter, I don't know where it came or whatever, but that changed quite rapidly, which is a shame.
People walking, I mean, we used to go out at night to visit as well, and that stopped. People just stayed at home and watched the telly.
Yeah.
But there wasn't as many ghost stories, Paul, as you know.
Yes.
That always
right.
happened when you went out for a walk. You know, something strange happened.
Yeah.
It was pitch black.
Yes. Oh, endless ghost stories. Yeah. Yeah. Donaghy's down in Coolers, particularly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a shame, but I feel very privileged to have met, particularly that older generation that were so full of stories, also ghost stories, but other stories as well, like Nan, and they were amazing. And I always regret not having started photographing them a bit earlier, because Nan had already died then, and also recording voices, because I don't know about you, but hearing their voices is so evocative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Missing, not seeing them.
Yeah.
And trying to remember their faces, because I don't know if you remember Nana Docky. Nana Docky, really, we loved going to see her, but she loved us coming to see her more. And she was right beside Miguel's house, and you had to climb up the hill. And we would be like little soldiers, because my brother Jerry would have to go in the lead because he was older, and I would be the next one, and because I was the next oldest, and then my sister Catherine, and then Tony at the end. And we'd have to keep our hands out so that we wouldn't let the other person go in front of us, because it does age order. You know?
Yeah, the hierarchy.
So she delighted in having us come to visit her. We'd be there I was there for the whole hour. You know. And she taught us one time, she was teaching us how to do the sword dance.
Oh, yeah.
And she was feisty and holding onto her skirts and, you know, getting us up and dancing. I mean, I wish, you know, I can't even picture her face, you know.
Yeah.
All the times that we spent in their company, you know. So I wish there was more photographs and their voices, and again with the ferry man, there you had Yang and Un, but also Ian Elling. We were very close to them, because they were there taking us across on some very rough days to school, and they were very cheery, always joking and making sure that we were happy and felt safe. Yeah. You know, even though that there was waves.
Yeah, I mean, that photograph I showed, it gives a false impression. It looks like a tiny little stretch, but in fact, it wouldn't cross there. It was a much longer stretch over to Castle Bay itself, which is around the hill. And that was quite not the safest of crossings. And quite a few people died doing that. I seem to remember quite a few people died.
Yes.
Crossing. So,
So if I could I just enter the frame a little here?
Yes.
Flora, you're talking about not enough photography, but I suppose Paul's project has been really quite important in capturing some of that otherwise wouldn't have been recorded in this way. And it's akin to recording storytelling, and it's an aspect of kind of oral history. So we shouldn't underestimate the recording and grabbing images of the now in terms of the significance that they will have later. I met you at the museum in Benbecula, Flora. You, your sister, your husband Neil, and maybe other people from Vatersay came to Paul's opening at the museum, August, September 2019 it was. So not that far away. And that was a fascinating visit and indeed opening. Paul gave a talk and there was some refreshments, but we ended up all sitting around listening to these stories and ghost stories, island ghost stories, which was really a special moment, if you remember that right. Now, Paul, invited me to go to Vatersay after Benbecula. And people think, oh, Benbecula, Barra, Vatersay, they're all close together. They're not. I mean, there's a long stretch of land. Anyway, I couldn't go. And I regret that. I really regret that now, because he told me there's a ceilidh on. What I didn't know was that it was the Vatersay boys that were playing at that. And for those who do not know, the Vatersay boys, they're very popular. For those who do not know them, look them up. But some of the personnel are obviously from Vatersay, and it's a band that's driven by 2 accordions and a drummer and a drum kit, augmented by guitar, bass, flutes, and all the rest of it. There's some wonderful YouTube clips up online. So I just wanted to mention that as a footnote. I hope that's not too much of a diversion, because a couple of the guys in the Vatersay boys, there's a connection to Paul's photographs, because Peggy and Dee Dee are their parents, I believe.
That's right, yeah. And Michael was actually the guy feeding the cattle.
Okay.
With the little girl pointing her finger at me,
right,
wagging her finger at me. Yeah. So that was Michael. I do have pictures of Andy, but he's not living on the island anymore. But yeah.
And there is a photograph of Flora
Island anymore.
As a younger woman in one of your photographs somewhere, I do believe. Is that correct? In the book?
In the book? No, I don't think so. I mean, I have photographed Flora quite a lot, because I photographed her wedding with Neil.
I was too fast in my younger day, obviously.
I think you were fairly successful in avoiding me. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Well, I hope it's not too long before you can get back to Vatersay, now that things, hopefully, with restrictions lifting, that travel will happen, Paul.
Yeah.
That you can continue with this, hopefully, lifelong project in documenting the place and the people of Vatersay. So if that's okay with you, Flora,
yes,
we can let you go for the moment, if that's okay. But
that's fine.
Stay in the background, and thank you very much for joining us. We may get you back on right at the end to say cheerio, which will be quite soon. So thank you again, Flora.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. So what does photography mean to you? I think Paul's spoken quite honestly about that from his perspective and his project, but what does photography mean to you is the title of a book, a collection of writings by various authors that Grant Scott recently published through, again, Blue Coat Press. And it's a collection of, I can't remember how many writings, maybe up to about 100 different photographers offering their commentary on that very question. So it's a really, really useful book for students and photographers, all sorts of opinions, and some you agree with, some you disagree with, which is all part of what the United Nations of Photography is all about. It's about stimulating thought and debate and discussion around photography, which Grant does very well indeed from his shed. Are you joining us now, Grant?
I am, but not from my shed.
Not from your shed. I'd love to see your shed. Is it a metaphorical shed, or does it exist?
No, it's definitely a clapperboard shed, and it definitely exists, as Paul knows.
Yeah. So you're a photographer, producer, writer, but very much a champion of the sector. And you both, weirdly enough, know one another. Tell us about this.
Well, yeah, I mean, we went to the same school, and I met Paul when I was 12. So literally the year that he first went up to Vatersay was the year we met. We were in the same art room through our school years. We went to Foundation together in Wimbledon, where we went to school. And then Paul went off to Goldsmiths to study fine art. I went off to St. Martin's to do graphics. And then we didn't see each other again, I don't think, until a few years ago when I was in Amsterdam for judging the World Press Photo Awards. And we met up. And that was when I found out he was a photographer, because I didn't know at all. And he started to talk about this work, which I also didn't know that he'd done. Even when we were at school together, I didn't know. He's a very secretive chap. And yeah, and so we started to talk about it. And I kind of said, well, you know, I put him in touch with Craig at Cafe Royal Books. And, you know, we kind of spoke about getting this work seen.
Ah, that's good to know that you were instrumental in pushing that along. Yeah,
I think that's true, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true. And also putting me in touch with Blue Coat. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms of our connection was at school was also important in terms of on the art side, because we were in that art room together talking about art all the time. And we were very much, that was our connection really, through art and music, must be said.
Yeah.
And in case anyone hadn't noticed, you're quite a Bob Dylan fan.
Yeah, I am. But, you know, I think what I would say, you know, from a photographic perspective, you know, when I first met Paul, I always knew he was kind of from a different planet, really, than me. You know, he was, and I wrote the stuff I wrote in the book, I've written a little kind of thing in the book, is I always saw his work and I was incredibly impressed as a painter and as a drawer. And then when I saw the photographs, I was just completely blown away that he had been, you know, he's able to do everything. It's really annoying. But, you know, the work was so sympathetic and there was so much empathy. So he'd really, you know, photography is about creating a visual language, and he has that in his work. It is him. And I think that's really something, you know, to cherish, actually, as a body of work. I think it's hugely important, as you quite rightly say, Malcolm, as a document, but also as a body of work, which is very different to a lot of other photographers working in a similar way, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very true. So just to show you the book again, folks, here it is. I think my colleague John has shared a link to this. There's a lot in it, and not to steal your thunder, Flora, but Christmas is coming up soon. That's definitely a very good gift to get.
Thank you.
I think we're hopefully still in a kind of early formative stages of this work entering into the world. There's been a couple of exhibitions, but it still has to get out there at a larger scale, and the work taken to other places outside of Scotland. So hopefully we will see that happening quite soon. Do you have any further questions to Grant before we let him go at the moment?
No, that was very nice what he was saying. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I am quite secretive, as he said. I'm not deliberately secretive, but I keep myself to myself, which isn't actually the most useful trait as a photographer, I think. But anyway, people tolerate me up on the island as well. I'd love to have the island wit and other way of communicating. But I'd just like to say that I did have a very special artistic bond with Grant, and especially at those ages, it's just one or two people can make a big difference in whether you persevere in a certain route or a certain way of thinking. So thanks, Grant.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Grant.
That's right. Thanks very much, guys.
And again, United Nations of Photography, look it up. You won't be disappointed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. You can switch off your video now. So there's only a couple of questions so far, so folks, if there's any comments and indeed questions, put them into the chat now. A couple of things here, Paul. Murag Ramsey says, I've taught at St. Alois's for the last 20 years and knew Father Barnyard well. My question was going to be about his appearance in one of your photos. He always talked with enormous fondness of Vatersay. But what was Father Barnyard's connection to St. Alois's? That's my question at the end there.
Well, he before he came down to London, he was in London very briefly. In fact, he was teaching in St. Aloysius, and then there was so he left London. I think he was in Wales for a while, but then eventually he was back in Glasgow, back at St. Aloysius, teaching and he was active in St. Aloysius very shortly before his death in 2018. Okay. So that's the connection there.
Yep. Neil Nisbet, the husband of Flora, asks, what made you stick with black and white when colour film came along?
Good question. I mean, we're talking about back then. I do take colour photographs as well. But back then, yes, it was a choice. Are you going to put a colour film in or a black and white film? And I think it's maybe because I always like that step of transformation. I was looking, I guess, with a painter's eye rather than a documenter's eye. And I always like that step away from the apparent reality. And by removing the colour, it kind of removed any excess information. So it's just getting to the core. I think I've spoken about that. I think photography is all about selection. It's all about getting down to the core of what you want to depict. And black and white kind of clears the field a bit, makes things that much more essential.
Okay. And Neil also asks a question, which I guess is for Grant, who's in the background somewhere now, but he asks if Grant autographs his book. Does Neil mean, does he want a signed book? Is that what you mean? Do you think? Anyway, he's asking, do you autograph your books? And I guess he's asking, I guess that means, do you sign your books?
If I bump into somebody who's got a copy of the book and they want me to ruin it, yes, I will.
Okay. So they are easy to get a hold of.
Yeah.
Maybe not directly from you, Grant. Maybe from
no. What does photography mean to you is from Blue Coat Press. You can get it straight from their website, as you can get Paul's Island Tides from the same place.
Yeah. Okay. Another question here, Ross Sampson. Good one here. What, if any, influence did Paul Strand's Hebridean work have on you? Were you aware of it, Paul?
Not at that stage, no. Not in the 80s. I mean, obviously, since then, I've seen it and admired it. I would say latterly, actually Gus Wiley's book actually had more influence. Specifically, one particular photograph, which is of Flora's elder sister, standing outside the church, with all the men lined up against along the outside as they're coming out of the service, and Elisabeth has got a child, one of her youngsters, in her arms, and it's one of those photos that I wish I had taken, and it was because it just sums up a scene that I had seen so many times. And I think that was that one photograph probably encouraged me to start going back regularly and doing this slightly more consistently, for photographing the people, because I'd kind of stopped photographing the people in the 90s for some weird reason, and I was just doing, I was actually photographing plastic on beaches, which is why Mandy's exhibition appealed enormously at street level. But I never really took it that step further. But instead of doing people, I'd doing landscapes and little details of landscape. But seeing Gus Wiley's book around that time in the 2000s, I thought, wow, I should make use of this relationship I have. But that sounds very Machiavellian. It was not like that at all. But I should certainly start photographing people again.
Yeah. And that connects to a question Ruben Warledge has asked. He does say that now the project is finished, will you still visit and photograph Vatersay? I would say, well, it's not finished, because you will continue to photograph when you do go back.
Yeah.
We'll probably round it up now, Paul, but there's a question here from Catherine Beaton, who asks, do you know Catherine, right?
Well, you do as well. She was at this is Flora's sister.
Ah, right, Catherine, okay. Have you got a favourite photo from Vatersay, and what is your fondest memory from your many trips to the island?
Oh my goodness.
And of course it was meeting Catherine, wasn't it?
Of course, yes. Nice that you're there, Catherine. Nice that you joined us. Favorite photo? Oh goodness me. I'm actually very fond of the one of Jennifer, the child on the sofa in Dee Dee's house. And in fact, my first choice for the book cover was going to be that. But Colin at Blue Coat thought that was a bit somber. But I think for me, that's probably if I had to choose one, that would be one of my favorites. A favorite memory? No, but it would have been those early, if I can lump all those early years together, just seeing these broad horizons, just a totally different way of life. It's very much a pink glow in my memory. I'm sure rose tinted, and particularly at Christmas time, going around houses with Father Barnyard and probably drinking too much whiskey as a young teenager. But yeah, there's too many really, too many memories.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question, Catherine. So thank you very much, Paul. That has been fascinating and very moving. We're going to bring this to a close now. Just like to say that the exhibition is on at Rockfield Centre in Oban until the end of the month. Now, it's only open Tuesdays and Thursdays. That will be punctuated by the odd day when it is open. So do check the opening times should you manage to travel to Oban. If you happen to miss it, you can see a 3D version of the exhibition on the exhibition page on our website. And if you've got a VR headset, you can have that experience as well. This talk will remain online, and we'll clip it and put it onto our YouTube channel. Now, there is also a wonderful short digital work that Paul made with us on his Vatersay project that I would encourage you all to try and see. It is on our YouTube channel, but it will be shown in a package of works on the Screen Machine, which is Scotland's mobile cinema. So there's 4 special events coming up into which we are showing 5 or 6 different digital shorts. But the locations for that are in the various places familiar to the Screen Machine, which tours to remote places in the Highlands and Islands. But the first one is on Sunday in Linneclayton, Benbecula. Then the next one is a week on Saturday in Castle Bay, which of course very close to Vatersay. So Catherine, spread the word about that. There'll be Paul's digital short as well as works by John Marr, David Gordon, Craig Easton, Mandy Backer and Coulson and Tennant. So not to be missed, and that marks a very good partnership that we have been undertaking with the Screen Machine. So we've shared the links to the book, we've shared the links to the exhibition, we've plugged as much as we can. We can ask Flora and Grant to come in and just say cheerio and wave goodbye to everyone, if that is okay, if you are still there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So thanks to the both of you, and Paul, thanks for inviting them. I think this has added something quite special to this whole event. So thanks all of you, and see you all again soon. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye now.
Bye.